So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Married Bulma? So let's start the series. Even at the young age of 17, Naruto is already regarded as a hero. And after putting an end to a huge conflict and, most importantly, defending his loved ones with blood, sweat, and tears, how could he not be? The child was ecstatic, having at last achieved his goal of being accepted for who he really is, not simply because of his ancestry. He is, after all, the son of the first headmaster, Naruto's mother and father, both of whom are heroes, cherished parents, and friends. The blonde young man strolled through the lonely, recently constructed hide ninja village of Gakure no Sato with his stunning, enormous blue eyes. He had long, golden hair, and the sky was clear and full of lovely stars. He sighed and carried on, saying, "I'm so bored, 5th Headmaster Abakan, I haven't been given any missions all week, Databeo." He was simply following his legs, he had no idea where he was heading. The lad continued walking, saying hello to the few people who were passing by. Some were shutting their stores, while others were taking a stroll with their kids and family. This made the blonde man nostalgic. He wished Ero-Sennin and his own were still living. He missed him so much. Even though he was a filthy old man, he was ultimately a wonderful godfather, friend, and person. He was startled when he heard the loud cry, "Naruto," and turned to see his comrades and pals. She raised one of her golden eyebrows in perplexity and asked the three boys, "Hey, what are you guys doing here so late?" The single girl on the team, a young woman with emerald green eyes and bubblegum pink hair, groaned, "We should have asked that ourselves, Naruto," and she was dressed in a red jacket with black stripes and a matching skirt. "That's right, we came to your house to see if you wanted to have dinner with us," a different, male voice said. The boy, dressed in a short black shirt and matching slacks, had black hair and black eyes. HMMP. The third member only gave the blonde boy a blank expression. He merely gazed at the recently rescued member from the darkness, with his blue eyes rolling. Wearing a gray shirt and dark blue jeans, the boy has ebony eyes and jet black hair with blue streaks. Sigh, Naruto buddy, and Sakura-chan. Thank you for the offer, Tibeo. Don't worry, I've already had dinner. She smiled and put her arms behind her neck. The girl grinned at her blonde buddy and said, "Where were you headed?" "I'm not sure, but I suppose I will go see my parents, Tibeo." "Are you coming with me, Tibeo?" the three of them said, glancing at the blonde boy who was merely sighing. "No, Naruto-kun, you have to be alone with them," the youngster with the black hair said. Sakura nodded, and the boy with the raven hair merely observed. The blonde boy nodded and carried on. Sakura broke the silence as soon as he was out of sight of his three friends. Her whisper, "Naruto, I still can't believe his father is his own hero," caught both young men's attention. Shaking their heads, they asked, "Didn't you know?" Naruto, from a very young age, felt a great admiration for the fourth headmaster, who happens to be his father. The male simply gazed at her before saying their goodbyes and heading home, naturally thinking the same things. Naruto. The voyage across dimensions. A young woman with lavender hair and stunning eyes of the same hue was working on her study somewhere else, or more accurately, in a different dimension, until Bulma. The young scientist mother heard the cry, which she was familiar with, got up, cleaned her hands, noticed her tiny child sleeping, and went to the door. She saw her friends, the Namekian, her future kid, and the arrogant Scion Prince, after her stroll. They were giving her a serious, hopeful gaze. She looked at them and said, "What's up, guys?" Her small, bald friend approached her and gave her some documents. She said, "These are them," and nodded. "Okay, Dad, let's go to the lab." Well, he However, the poor old man was silenced by a loud shout and a burst of energy. They hurried together to the lab, where they were blinded by the intense light. The light went out after a short while. Bulma yelled, "Trunks," and pushed the others away as she ran, spotting her child playing with some blonde hair. The others approached Bulma and said, "What's wrong, Bulma?" After glancing at them, she turned to face her infant. They followed her eyes and spotted a small youngster with intense golden hair who was no younger than Gohan. He was on the ground, unconscious. Who is that kid? Why is he in the lab? How did he arrive there? And why was he so energetic? Bulma and the rest were astounded as the blonde young guy opened his eyes and revealed stunning sky blue ones. "Oh my head, Tebeo," they heard. After feeling a weight on top of him, he caressed his head and looked down to see a young infant caressing his cheeks. "Baby?" The blonde boy raised his blue eyes and glanced at everyone in the room when he heard a strange, feminine voice ask, "Hey, are you alright?" All he did was nod his blonde head. He picked up the little boy, who was laughing, and put him on his head. One of the blonde boy's blonde eyebrows went up. The young youngster on his shoulders rubbed his tiny hands through the boy's hair while laughing joyfully. The sight of a man dressed in the same hue as his outfit caused the Uzumaki's blue pupils to enlarge. With a droplet of perspiration on their forehead, the other boys watched as the blonde and raven-haired boys yelled, "WAAA! Who are you?" simultaneously. Together, the two lads exclaimed, "I'm Goku/NRDO, with a Tebeo appended at the end." The others, not all of them, laughed uneasily. They all acted in the same way and had an odd fixation on orange. The man with raven hair grinned broadly at the small blonde youngster, sensing a strong energy all around him. He saw the blonde boy make looks at the infant as he lowered him and put him on his face. The young youngster chuckled at his mischievous behavior. The blonde youngster, who was merely sucking his fingers, shouted, "Wah, it smells bad, Tebeo," and made a disgusted look. The young woman walked over to the child and took her infant, asking, "Seriously?" With a broad smile, the blonde boy gave him over and then took a few steps, which instantly knocked him down. "Pain Tebeo. Are you okay?" the blonde lad said, rubbing his nose before turning to face a boy with jet black hair and eyes who was dressed strangely in a purple battle suit and an odd white vest. The blonde child said, "Pain, but why did I fall?" But when he heard his own voice, his eyes opened and he screamed loudly, shocking not only his mother and the young boy but also everyone else. "What happened to me, Tebeo? Kurama, tell me right now. What the hell happened to me?" Kurama, the young woman and the world's strongest warriors exchanged startled glances before the little blonde boy scowled and sat down on the ground, bending his legs. The boy with the blonde hair murmured, "Let's see," and parted his lips. "Why did I become a child again?" He raised an eyebrow in question. The others gave him a perplexed look. "Speak. Brat, what do you want me to say? I know even less if you don't." "Damn it, how can you not know?" the blonde yelled loudly, causing the demon inside of him to become irritated. The fighters rubbed their cheeks. "Don't tell me the great king of demons doesn't know." "You damn brat, you'll see when I catch you." The blonde boy laughed loudly as the others flinched at the sound of a menacing voice. The blonde said, "Calm down, old man, I didn't know you were so easy to anger," as he stood up and straightened his clothes, or at least the ones he believed still suited him. The demons were stunned by what had just transpired. It all happened so quickly. They were discussing something at first, and then they heard a loud shriek. A peculiar light blinded them as they rushed. Then they noticed a little blonde boy giving them an odd look. The blonde boy was now conversing with a demon as if it were nothing. "Guys, Goku. The blond boy gazed at the ceiling, perplexed, while the others grinned. This child. The blond lad simply glanced at the raven-haired youngster, dumbfounded, and questioned, "What's wrong with Kaiosama? Bring him to me so I may give him a thorough examination." With a "what" expression on his face, Uzumaki turned to face the others. He had no idea what was going on. The man with the raven hair quickly grabbed him by the shoulder and touched his forehead with his fingertips. After giving him a perplexed look, the blonde opened his eyes and felt himself vanish and then resurface in an unfamiliar setting. Where are we, wow? And why is the atmosphere so oppressive? The blond boy inquired, perplexed, and attempting to move, but his actions were odd and amusing all at same. The demon with 9 tails cried, "Tsk, we are in the land of the gods." Tebeo, the blond boy excitedly yelled, frightening Bulma, King Kai, and everyone else in his vicinity. The blond youngster began rushing right away, watching everything, or, to put it another way, snooping around. Hey, what's this place?" he asked. The demon god exclaimed, "You little brat. Didn't I explain to you that this is the land of the gods? This is the place where the dead go, if they did good things in their lives," as a vein appeared on his temple. "That child is getting more and more foolish every day. Pathetic." Everyone's pupils opened to their fullest after hearing this cry, which was heard by the god of gods and the others. If I say everyone, then Vegeta and Piccolo are included. The voice belonged to whom? Knowing to whom that voice belonged, the god simply grinned uneasily. Well, don't be angry, Databeo." The blond boy approached the others with his arms behind his neck. "Does that imply something?" "Hi, old man." Kaiosama questioned, "What does Gaki want?" The blond boy made a cute pout by puffing out his cheeks. Bulma reddened and cried out, as did the other girls who were in the vicinity. The god nodded and said, No. These are the people who died, right? That means... Kid, that means we're here. When an unusual voice, one that the blond man knew well, was heard, everyone looked around. The owner was an elderly man with unkempt, gray hair. His eyes were dark black, and he donned a white jacket and a green kimono. He was grinning at them. Ero Sennin, the blond boy's eyes welled with tears not just at the sight of that individual but also because he was his godfather, mentor, and family. Ero Sennin, the blond lad yelled loudly, ran quickly, and gave the elderly man a hug. Surprised at his size, he returned the blonde's impetuous embrace and exclaimed, "How many times do I have to tell you not to call me that," with a broad smile. "Wait, kid? What happened to you? You're so tiny, how did I know you?" He broke into a broad smile and said, "I don't know, but I'm glad to see you. And are you not pleased to meet us?" The blond man recognized the voices and turned his face. Grinning at the identification, he suddenly broke away from the elderly man and rushed in the direction of the crowd, shouting loudly. Seeing the young blond youngster run and give his loved ones a firm hug while tears filled his blue eyes was a heartwarming moment. There were other surprises in addition to the fact that it touched a lot of people walking by. The tiny blond boy's survival was unknown to Kaiosama, but the danger was worth it, wasn't it? And nothing for us, Otto/Naruto-kun? The blond boy in his parents' arms felt a shudder go through him when he heard their voices. With wide eyes, he turned and moved away from his parents, walking past the warriors in the direction of the two individuals. It was unbelievable. Ero Sennin first, followed by his parents, and now these two? Itachi Uchiha, the elder brother of his best friend, and Nagato Uzumaki, his brother, were the two individuals standing in front of him. What are you doing here?" the blond youngster asked in disbelief, his tiny blonde head unable to comprehend the situation. The redhead said, "Well, we're accompanied, little brother," and moved to the side. The blonde child was being approached in the distance by a very special person, the same person who had watched him grow up, cared for and shielded him, and, well, none other than Ajazan. "Hi Naruto-kun, how are you? It's been a while." The young blonde boy was so happy that it was overwhelming. It was immensely consoling to see so many individuals he adored and loved in front of him once more. He was positive that he would only ever see them in his nightmares. However, he was fully aware that there were further surprises. He ignored his feelings and gave the elderly man a powerful hug. "Grandpa, Grandpa, you idiot," the young child with the blonde hair hiccuped. The only way to console the blonde lad was for the old man to massage his back and a portion of his hair like he had done when he was younger. As Jiraiya watched his godson embrace the three figurines, he said, "I see the Kagi is happy, don't you think, Naruto father?" His pupil observed his son shed happy tears. The elder blonde said, "Yes, but don't you think this is too much," as he looked at his sensei, who grinned and raised an eyebrow. He felt like someone was staring at him, but he chose to ignore it. "That blonde fool, Naruto father, deserves all of that and more. He's been through a lot, made and lost a lot of friends, but I believe the next entry will be a little difficult for him." The younger blonde lad dried his tears and turned to face a hut, his eyes widening as he sensed that familiar presence. The warriors and the three of them stared. And no, it can't be, that presence is, in fact, that presence was the same person who sacrificed his life to keep him and his girlfriend safe. The blonde whispered, "Niji," as a hand grasped the door and a fully formed figure appeared. It was a young man with moon-colored eyes, pale complexion, and brown hair pulled back in a short ponytail. Wearing a white suit, he grinned at the blonde. "It's been a long time, Naruto." Niji, he ran over to his friend and started crying, the most he had ever cried in his life, not since he had witnessed Gaara's or his parents' second tears. Even though he appeared to be a winner, he didn't care that it was International Naruto Cry Day. "Niji." He put his hands on the little blonde boy's shoulders and then said, "Naruto, don't cry. It was my decision to give my life for you and Hinata-sama." He was still taken aback by the blonde's size, but he didn't care. "It's not your fault. I never blamed you. What makes me happy is that you're both alright." Grinning, the older blonde man approached the warriors who were observing the event. Beside her infant, the lone lady felt her mother's tears trickle down her cheeks as she gazed with tears in her eyes. He looked at the older men and said, "I've seen each of you fight, you're good, very good. I ask you, as one father to another, that you take care of and protect my son. He's the only thing keeping my wife and me here." Everyone turned to watch the redhead and the elderly man approach them. "Don't be concerned, Father Naruto." The son patriarch yelled, "Naruto father, we will protect Naruto," with his usual self-assured, innocent smile, and his companion slapped him. He gave her a glance and pouted a little. "Hey, why did you do that, Bulma?" The woman kept striking the dark-haired boy, which caused him to pout even more immaturely, saying, "Because you have to respect others, Baka." The old guy and his pupil grinned with a bead of perspiration on their brows, while the redhead grinned. The redhead said, "I like it," attracting the attention of the woman who was assaulting her buddy. As the briefs approached both parents with their infant still in their arms, the lilac-haired child noticed a blonde head and lifted his tiny hands, opening and shutting them to observe the well-known hue. "Abel?" The woman with the purple hair grinned and raised her son to the point where both parents could see him. "Of course, I'm Bulma Brief," she said. While the elder blonde man scooped up young Trunks with his mother's consent, the redhead and her son made various faces to make the child giggle. The blond man appeared quite familiar to the young man with the lilac hair, as though he had seen him before, but he couldn't recall where. As they watched the younger kid with lilac hair play with the older boy's blonde hair, they both grinned and said, "Nice to meet you, Bulma. I'm Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto father. Dime? Do you think that Naruto can manage the... You mean?" He merely sighed as the woman nodded. He was aware that it was a lot, but witnessing the person who sacrificed her life for him and his companion. It was time or never, but he wasn't positive. "I don't know, Kushina. I don't know how our son will react, but it's better that I see him now." Completely bewildered, Beulah raised an eyebrow until she noticed a figure leaning against the door. It was a young man with brown hair, porcelain skin, a white yukata, and, oddly enough, eyes that were as lovely as the moon. "NRDO," the little blond lad said as he withdrew from the elderly guy, tears still running down his cheeks and a lovely smile on his face. With a sigh of frustration, Vegeta folded his arms and studied the blond boy. Unbeknownst to him, he was drawn to this blond boy for some reason. He needed to know what it was. The Uzumaki ran to his parents and played with tiny Trunks' hands while grinning even more. After getting his mother's okay, he nodded, grabbed him up, and started spinning him around, which made them both giggle. But as he stopped whirling the young boy, he recognized a very familiar figure, and his eyes widened. "Hi, Naruto. And Niji? Is that you?" the brunette asked, nodding and grinning slightly. With the child in his arms, the blond man approached his friend and squeezed him with both his friend and companion using his free hand. "You too, Naruto?" They were exactly the same age and size when they first met. They were both teenagers on the verge of adulthood, so it was odd. It was an odd, unreal setting, but it didn't matter anymore. The fact that the tiny blond boy, who was also his friend and the hero of the shinobi world, was with his loved ones was what mattered. "Dada dada," the little Trunks rambled, drawing the brunette's attention. The blond boy put the child on his shoulders and grinned slightly as he played with the blonde hair. "Come on, Niji, I'm going to introduce you to Tebeo." The blonde seized his wrist with excitement and rushed in the direction of the warriors, who were gathered with their parents and friends. "Mr. Goku, guys. Hey Naruto, are they your friends?" the boy with the raven hair inquired, placing his hands behind his neck and grinning calmly but a little foolishly. The brown-haired lad grinned to himself as he looked at the blonde and raven-haired boys since they were both very distinct and similar at the same time. "Indeed, they are." The raven-haired man with dark circles under his eyes bowed gently to the warriors, who naturally accepted and did the same. "Uchiha Itachi, a pleasure." "Uzumaki Nagato." A redhead grinned as he presented himself to the warriors. "Sarutobi." The elderly man bowed and grinned. "Jiraiya," the gray-haired man said, grinning perversely. "Kafero Senin Kaf Kaf." "Brats, what did you say?" "Arosenn." Still carrying the infant on his head, the elderly man chased the blond lad in an immature way. As the boy's mother grinned at him, little Trunks laughed and eagerly lifted his arms. "He looks very content with my Naruto, Trunks. Bulma-san, don't you think so?" The blue-haired mother wondered if her future son had ever been like her baby as she watched her son laugh. She grinned nostalgically as she saw him play with Naruto's hair, laugh, and be pursued by Jiraiya. As a mother, she knew that this tranquility would soon come to an end, and Kushina saw it. "How are you, Bulma-san?" "What? Yes, I just had that thinking." The younger blonde youngster, still being pursued by his godfather and guardian, laughed gleefully. Although he was glad to see his loved ones, he recalled his peculiar purpose for being there. It wasn't the time to find out, but he had to. He needed to cherish the brief times he spent with his family. What is the real reason for my arrival? How did I end up here? And most importantly, why do I look so young? He kept asking himself, perplexed by how quickly he had adapted to this gravity. Then he stopped suddenly, feeling a familiar presence that caused his eyes to open wide. Naruto? Naruto, what's wrong? Goku said, noticing the blonde boy's somber and slightly alarmed appearance. Although that face was odd, he had the impression that something very serious, much more serious than the androids and more serious than Cell, was taking place. He swallowed hard and said, no, it can't be, it's impossible. His look remained terrified and impressed. After observing the blonde guy in shock, the warriors turned to face the others and noticed that the individuals the blonde man cared about were acting similarly, which led them to conclude that something was amiss. It just cannot be. Impossible. Did he not die? He's alive, damn it. The warriors raised an eyebrow at one another, then at the blonde man and his companions. What was going on? Who remained alive? Above all, what was frightening them so much? When they saw King Kai, they realized something very significant was happening or was going to happen, even though they were unable to detect any hazardous key or even the slightest threat. This is not feasible. How is he still alive? I witnessed his death firsthand, therefore I am well aware of it. Was it possible he returned? However, how? This is so weird, so unbelievable. And now I'm in this really weird world with my loved ones, well, not all of them, just my family, and some really weird warriors with kind eyes all around me. Only Mr. Goku, that is. What will I do? This is unfair. Madara, Kagaya, Obito, and Naruto's friend, and now him? He's back alive again. This is going to drive me insane, damn it. I heard my mother say, honey. I opened my eyes and turned to face her at that. She seemed unconcerned as she grinned at me. I arched an eyebrow. Why did she seem so composed? Nothing's going to happen. We're safe for now. Kushina is right, Naruto, I noticed as Dad smiled at my mom. With a sigh, I glanced back at those incredibly bizarre warriors. I couldn't recall where I had seen Goku, but it seemed quite familiar. I arched another eyebrow and motioned for him to go on. You little brat, you noticed, didn't you? Kurama snorted and grinned, amused. In actuality, I knew what it was about, but I would act as though I didn't in order to irritate him. You're playing dumb, aren't you? Get to the point, I scowled, sensing that everyone was staring at me. I chose to sit in a meditative stance and ignore them in order to have a more comfortable conversation with Kurama. I watched him, trying not to throw myself at him and suffocate him, but it wasn't the time for that. That man Goku, along with that grumpy one, that brat, and that kid, have powers that go beyond his perspective. That power surpasses yours, because if you didn't notice, as always. I continued to observe him, waiting for him to go on. They don't work with chakra. I will admit that I was a little taken aback by that knowledge, but I already knew it. His energy was different from ours, and it sounded very familiar. I suddenly opened my eyes as I recalled what Ero Sennin had told me. Typical. Suddenly, Naruto opened his eyes and got to his feet, moving at the same pace in the direction of his godfather and master, who arched an eyebrow and glanced at the blonde lad. That? Ero Sennin, do you recall the talk we had prior to training 3 years ago? The warriors scratched their cheeks, obviously bewildered, while the ninjas exchanged glances and gazed at the perverse sage. What were they discussing? It wasn't the time for that, he thought. They returned their focus to the pair. Jiraiya kept studying the blonde, deciphering his query. Before realizing it, he looked at the warriors and then back at the blonde. What more of a fool could he be? He grinned at the Kagi while slapping his forehead with his palm. "I suppose you were smarter this time," the elderly guy said, grinning proudly at his youthful and energetic student. Even though he still considered himself a dwarf who had saved the world that they both were, he was genuinely proud of how quickly and maturely he had grown. The blonde man turned on his heel and approached the warriors after saying, "They're not like us, Ero Sennin." He astonished Gohan by standing in front of them and placing both hands on his head. Gohan gave him a startled glance before turning to face his father, who merely shrugged. "What do you do?" "I want to see something, don't worry, it's nothing negative." He closed his eyes, remained motionless, and trusted the blonde man's words, though he wasn't sure why. Piccolo kept a close eye on the blonde boy, looking for any indication of danger or cause for concern. Surprisingly, he discovered nothing odd. Without a doubt, this youngster was pure in every manner imaginable. It was quite strange since he was the only human he had ever met without animosity, bitterness, or darkness. He wasn't the only one who had attracted his interest, he was the second. Indeed, the arrogant Scion Prince shared Piccolo's mild fascination with that tiny insect. He had a certain quality. In his own view, he appeared feeble, of course, but he was stronger than the average individual. He had heard of humans possessing remarkable abilities, and his wife, a vermin he regarded as a friend, was a glaring illustration of such abilities. However, Vegeta didn't like anything about that little brat with blonde hair. He opened his eyes and motioned for his mentor to approach, saying, "I was right, they used that energy." He and the others went up to the blonde boy, who stepped aside to make room for Jiraiya from the little child with the raven hair. Jiraiya just grinned and put his ring finger on the boy's forehead. "Kagi, you were correct." The oldest Uchiha looked at them both and said, "What about Jiraiya-sama?" Yes, he was a genius, but he was also skilled at reading people, and those two had a plan that would turn out to be really intriguing in the future. Talk to Kagi. The elder man with the raven hair opened his eyes and grinned back at the younger blonde, who was filled with a vitality that had not been there when they first met. The blonde man said to the Sun Patriarch, "You work with Ki, right?" He agreed without hesitation, but how could he have known? "What, son?" "I always sneaked into the Hyde Ninja Village library as a kid to study about chakra and how it is controlled. One day, I came across a particularly specific book, and Ero Sennin gave me a thorough explanation of how to determine who controls Ki and how to avoid doing so." Flashback. A shy, quiet 7-year-old child with blonde hair fled his assailants by running through the streets of Hyde Ninja Hamlet. Why him? What did he do to deserve this? Why do they chase him every day trying to kill him? Well, not kill him, but leave him half dead in the streets, he asked himself as he raced like never before till he came to a sort of dead-end corridor. Feeling cornered, he swallowed hard. That wicked monster, where is he? Have you seen it, Tai Chi? No, sir. You damned, elusive demon. Search the entire village. We can't let that damned demon disappear without getting what he deserves. 2. Still trembling from the run and the fear, the little blonde kid exhaled with relief and put his little palm on his chest to slow his pounding heart. When he realized, or rather remembered, that the vandals were still wandering the town, he decided it was time to move on to his flat. He let out another sigh as his blue eyes darted around, looking for a door, an entrance, anything. Then he noticed it, a tiny window. Grinning, he leaped up the wall and crept in stealthily. This place, it feels familiar. He turned to smile after taking a whiff of the air. Apart from his apartment, Ichiraka Ramen, and the mountain where the heads of the headmaster rested, specifically the head of his idol, the fourth headmaster, the library was his fourth favorite spot, despite the fact that it was ridiculous and especially since it sounded familiar. The library. He used his hands to wipe his clothes and cautiously, or so he believed, moved through the bookshelves, the same volumes he used to read every night to get away from his assailant. So many books that I've read myself, he reflected, they're all the same ones, I've memorized every single one. He kept going through every room, every hallway, and reading every book and scroll about chakra, how to manipulate it, how to handle weapons, and most importantly, about elemental chakra. He understood that everyone had an element. He didn't know which one belonged to him because he lacked the elements to know, but he was certain, he didn't know how, but he knew very well, that this knowledge would one day be helpful to him, and he wasn't mistaken. He kept going until he came to a hole, or rather, an opening, on one of the shelves. Then, like any good, inquisitive child, he opened the hole, went inside, and shut it. He noticed a number of dirty tables and said, "What is this place, Databeo?" There were a number of heavy, aged-looking brown volumes on one of these tables. He approached it gently, unconcerned. He grasped one in his hands and read the title, saying, "These books are strange. It's the first time I've seen them. Key? What a strange title for a book. But I have nothing to do, and those guys are still out there looking for me." The blond man unsealed the tiny aperture, took the book in his hands, and left, shutting it behind him. In the future, when he needed to be by himself without anyone threatening to murder him, this would be an excellent spot to hide. He kept walking till he came to a sort of nook where people were sitting to read. Placing himself on one of them, he started reading the book. As he snuggled into the cushion, he said, "Let's see what it says here," and started reading the book. He raised one of his golden eyebrows and went on, clearing his throat. Ki is the internal viral energy possessed by all living beings. This can be developed if one learns to perceive, control, and manage their own energy. This is achieved through rigorous, specialized training. He blinked a few times, perplexed, and said, "Well, fighters who learn to control their ki can perceive how strong a warrior is. It has some similarities to chakra, but at the same time, it has different aspects." He moved, lying face down and changing the pages to continue reading because he was uncomfortable in his current position. His mouth dropped open in shock as he read, "Ki has many uses, expelling that inner energy in a single blow or several, detecting presences, detecting revealed powers, hidden powers, concealing one's presence, detecting which ki is benevolent or malevolent." He paused his reading and examined the word, saying, "It is concentrated at a point and increased to continuously or specifically improve an aspect." What? Does that mean that by reading the opponent's energy, you can see an increase in their defense, speed, among other things? Wow, this is impressive. Let's see what else there is. He turned the page to discover it was empty. He leaped to his feet and used his tiny feet to kick a cushion. Is that all? But I want to know more. That's not fair. Many years had gone by since that adventure, and the now adult blonde boy was still curious about what he had read at the library 7 years prior. The perverted sage who was now his mentor, Jiraiya, had been in front of him. The blonde called out to the elderly man, Erosenin, in a whisper. He gazed at him after opening his eyes. "Keiji, what's wrong?" The blonde youngster crossed his legs and closed his eyes, asking, "What is ki?" The elderly man's eyes widened as he looked at his young pupil in awe. Why wouldn't he be, anyway? He was inquiring about something he believed no one else was aware of. "What specifically are you looking for? And how much do you know about it?" "I only know the basic concept of ki, but what I'm wondering is if anyone can control it," he responded. The elderly gentleman was about to respond, but the blonde guy kept going. I mean, ki has its similarities to chakra, but it also has its differences. I'm very interested in the topic. I want to know if someone who's used to chakra can learn to use ki without any side effects. I want to know how to recognize someone who's using ki. He focused by placing his fingers on his chin and asked, "Can someone with chakra use ki?" Yes, it's possible, but it requires a lot of concentration and training. I did read that, but I'm not sure I get it. What sort of instruction? You see, ki has 3 fundamental levels, just like chakra. What levels are those? It's a little complicated, but I'll explain it to you, or rather, demonstrate it, he said, shocking the little blonde lad. The man got up and stepped back from the blonde boy by a few meters. Listen carefully and observe, because I'll only demonstrate this once, understood? The boy opened his eyes and nodded. He lifted his hand to exhibit 3 fingers, then lowered 2 to reveal 1, saying, "There are 3 levels." He lifted his other hand and released a little ball of energy that crushed a rock, saying, "Level 1, this is the basic level where you learn to control your powers. You don't waste much energy if you know how to use it." The demonstration left the blonde boy even more in awe. Whoa, that was amazing. She simply raised her arm and released some energy from it without making any hand gestures. Next level, he says, grinning and raising his other finger. He launches 2 successive energy blasts with the same raised hand. Level 2, this is the intermediate level. At this level, you perform powerful energy attacks without depleting your energy. You only use a small portion of the user's maximum ki, making the attack more powerful. Observe carefully. The blonde man's eyes enlarge and his lips part a little wider. Hold on, it's similar to the last one, except it was stronger and discharged more energy in bursts. Level 3, this is more difficult because ki control is higher at this level. Now for the last level. He raises his 3rd finger while studying his pupil's incredulity. It allows you to observe the enemy's energy and determine whether their strength has increased or not. Additionally, you can observe who is capable of handling that energy. Look, until he felt fingertips on his naked forehead, the blonde pondered in his brain. When did he remove his headband, I wonder? Focus. They both shut their eyes and focused their energies. The blonde had an odd feeling, as though 3 different energies were moving through his body. 2 of them, his own and the Kyuubi's, he recognized. What about the 3rd, though? He didn't know what it was, but he had the impression that he could get up and move his body whatever he pleased. He sensed harmony. A few hours later, both of them opened their eyes. Jiraiya kept looking at his young student, grinning and in awe at the same time. He was undoubtedly as unexpected as his father, but he was even more shocked to learn that he possessed ki. You, Naruto? I don't know why, but it seems like I have this energy. End flashbacks. Little son asked, looking both amazed and amused, "So that's how you learned about ki?" The blonde lad merely nodded, and Piccolo and the Sun Clan patriarch kept a close eye on the blonde boy. Then Piccolo came up to him. "What do you think?" I asked, keeping my gaze fixed on the blonde boy who was having a friendly conversation with Gohan and Bulma. He grinned really and said, "Naruto is a very interesting boy. I'll train him." "Are you sure about that, Goku?" He merely gave a nod. He nodded once more and said, "I guess I have to help." Kaita-sama. The god turned to face Naruto's father, who was speaking to him. "Is there a problem?" The older blonde man said, "What exactly is my son doing here? I'm not complaining, I love having him here with us, it makes my wife and me feel complete. But Naruto shouldn't be here. They must be looking for him in Hyde Ninja Village, as he stared at his son with concern. Both Naruto's father and Piccolo gazed at the god incredulously as he said, Hyde Ninja Village doesn't need Naruto right now. I mean, Naruto and what he has inside him is useful for this great battle that's coming. No, I'm not using him as a weapon, if that's what you're thinking, he said, observing the blonde's grave yet anxious gaze. Sokka, I'm not worried because I know he's in good hands. He studied the Scion Prince, who smiled slightly, as well as the Z fighters as they conversed with the blonde youngster. Piccolo muttered, King Kaita-sama, as he appeared behind Naruto's father, who was not merely watching his son. Does Naruto have anything to do with the androids? The Naruto father turned away from his kid and stared at Kaita-sama, saying, it does have something to do with it, since the person involved in all of this is from his world. So you're saying that? She put her hand on his shoulder and said, yes, Naruto father, we need your son. I know you're tired of seeing your son suffer more from that intense battle, but this time he won't be alone, and he certainly won't have that heavy burden on his shoulders. Goku yelled, it's everyone's responsibility, and put his hand on the other shoulder of the older blonde man. Don't worry, we'll take care of your son. She sighed and turned to face her hands. I know it very well, I know it, she said. It's time to rest. The blonde child laughed as the elder man with raven hair said, you're right, Milk is going to kill me, in frustration. He yelled, hey Gohan, it's time to go, and his son and Naruto fled in the direction of his father. Comprehend. I'm sorry, Naruto-san, the young kid said, smiling slightly and placing his arm behind his neck. He looked at his father and said, relax, and don't call me Asadebeo, in response. Otusan. She grinned and gave her son a hug in return, saying, don't say anything else, Naruto. Just know that your mother, Neji, Jiraiya, all of us will always be with you and support you. Bulma exclaimed, hey Goku, grabbing everyone's attention. The mother with the sleeping infant in her arms caught their attention. What will happen to Naruto-kun? The aforementioned merely nodded. Well, we made a decision, of course, if Naruto agrees. Okay, it's a decision made, only there's a problem. The clothes? Inquired Bulma. Goku scratched his head, trying to think of a way out of his predicament. Besides that, how are we going to tell Milk? He shrugged, he would ultimately come to terms with Naruto staying with them, even though he knew he would receive a lot of reprimands. It's time to go, guys. Beside Goku were the Z fighters, the Namekian, the Scion Prince, and the scientist. As though to signal that it was time to part ways, he gave the blonde a slight shove. Okasan, Otusan, Ajizan, Ero-senin, Itachi-san, Anakin, Neji, boys. The aforementioned individuals nodded and grinned at the blonde boy. Will we meet again? In response, Kushina kissed her son's forehead and caressed his hair. You can be sure of that, my son, but everything in its own time, she said. Just do your best and take good care of yourself. Naruto, simply look after yourself and don't overtrain. He pouted sweetly and said, kid, don't eat so much ramen. Jiraiya laughed and gave him a gentle slap on the head. He simply disregarded the two pairs of female screams and grinned, saying, have fun. If you see a pretty girl, you know what to do. Sarutobi bowed to the blonde boy, who grinned and scooped him up. Naruto-kun, I'm very proud of you. You grew up to be a great person, a hero. I only apologize for not being able to protect you properly when I was a child, Sarutobi said. Grandpa, it wasn't all bad. I had fun during those few peaceful moments I had. You taught me many things, and one of them is to keep seeing the world with positive eyes, she said with a beaming grin. Naruto-kun, look for yourself and, most importantly, train to be stronger than you are today. Nagato touched the blonde's chest and said, Itachi is right, but remember to train something more important. Your heart, let it remain pure. Anakin. Naruto. The boy turned to face his former competitor and pal. Thank you again for saving Hinata-sama. Become stronger and more noble. Good luck. As he made his way to the warriors, he grinned and gave each of his friends a hug. He glanced at the man with the chestnut hair before heading out. The scientist and the blonde kid vanished along with all the warriors when he said, You're wrong, Niji. I didn't save Hinata-chan, she saved me. The brunette grinned. The strongest fighters on Earth, along with Mr. Popo, Kamisama's former secretary, appeared before the deity at his temple. The deity of Earth said, Goku, guys, it's great to have you back. With the exception of 2 people, everyone grinned as they gazed at the god. Mr. Popo has something for young Naruto. The man handed him a bundle as the aforementioned approached him, perplexed. He thanked him and then looked up at the god. King Kaita-sama told me you didn't have suitable clothing for your upcoming training, and upon hearing that, Mr. Popo began making some outfits. We hope you like them. The blonde youngster answered, Thank you, Databeo, with a lovely, radiant smile. Krillin yelled to his pals, Goku, guys, see you tomorrow, I have to go, before turning to face the blonde lad. Nice to meet you, Naruto. It is entirely my joy. Tibeo. Yamcha smiled and the blonde lad smiled back. I have to go too, goodbye guys, and Naruto, it was nice meeting you too, she remarked. Humph. After a startled Naruto, the Scion Prince took off and sped away from the scene without a word. Bulma sighed and took a device that resembled a cartridge out of her pocket. That Vegeta, she said. There were capsules inside. Squeezing one between her fingers, she let it fall to the floor. A stunning spaceship was revealed as white smoke billowed out. Watching, Naruto was even more taken aback. See you tomorrow, guys. And Naruto-kun, you're welcome at my house anytime. I know you like ramen, so I'll make you some whenever you want, okay? He smiled and nodded. So the scientist and all the warriors left, leaving just Goku, Gohan, Piccolo, and then Naruto. As Kid Goku took off with his kid and the Namekian, Naruto gazed in awe. It's time for us to go too, King Kai. Thank you so much for everything, Mr. Popo, he said. Goku. He placed a contemplative finger to his chin before snapping it. Oh, sorry, I forgot you don't fly, Naruto. Flying cloud, he yelled to the horizon, cupping his hands like a megaphone. I know. Indeed, the blonde lad heard that a gorgeous cloud, as golden as the sun, was flying toward its owner at maximum speed. The blonde boy saw it land in front of him. Naruto observed as Goku gave him the all-clear to board by making hand gestures. When he did, he was shocked to find that the cloud was as gentle as if he were sleeping among sheep. Both the boy with raven hair and his son grinned. The blonde boy is a good man if the cloud allowed him to ride on it. The man with the raven hair looked at the blonde and said, All right, it's time to go, to his friends. Let's go quickly, so hold on to the cloud, okay? Okay, Tibeo, the 3 of them said as they swiftly made their way to their destination with Naruto perched on the cloud. They reached a sort of mountain after a few seconds. They kept going till they came to an oval-shaped house. The blonde child, still perched on the cloud, watched in awe as they all touched down. He witnessed the movement of the leaves by the wind and the birds emerging from their hiding spots to soar across the orange sky. Everything appeared lovely until he was startled by a scream. Gohan NNNNN. Everyone in the room was startled by the cry, but Goku grinned tensely, more accurately, frightened. The blonde glanced at Gohan, whose face was a picture, and Piccolo, who had merely a drop of perspiration on his temple. A purple-clad woman with a yellow sash and an orange cloth tied at the top emerged from the house. She had her hair pulled up. Not noticing Naruto, she rushed to her son and gave him a tight hug before glaring at her husband and the Namekian. An enraged Milk stepped forward, making the greatest warrior in the universe take a few steps back in dread. Goku, how can you be so irresponsible? I let Gohan go visit his friends, but not wander around like that. He has responsibilities and a lot to study, she said. However, Milk. But it doesn't matter. What counts today is that Gohan learns and gets into a reputable university so he can become a wonderful doctor or lawyer, not a lazy. Naruto murmured, "PSSST, Gohan," drawing Gohan's attention. Embarrassed, Gohan turned to face him. Naruto nodded and asked, "Is she your mother?" She turned to face her kid and said, "And you, Gohan, go take a bath right away because it's time to eat," ignoring her husband. However, she noticed blonde hair rather than black. She walked over and took a closer look, noting his golden hair, sky blue eyes, brown complexion, and, most importantly, the whisker-like patterns on his cheeks. "Gohan?" The youngster said, "Mom, this is Naruto Uzumaki, a friend," which made his mother turn her gaze from the blonde boy to her son, back to Naruto, then back to her son. "He will remain with us, Milk." "Absolutely not." Anna pivoted and looked at her husband once again. "It will only distract Gohan from his studies, besides, his parents must be worried." When the blonde man said, "That's no problem," the woman took notice. In the hopes that the blonde man wouldn't say something foolish that would annoy Son's wife, Goku, Piccolo, and Gohan gulped hard as they stared at him. "What are you saying?" Milk gave the blonde man a startled look and said, "Well, I won't interfere in Gohan's education, because I understand that studies are important, they're fundamental for anyone who wants to have a good future." The woman's eyes widened and her jaw closed as he pointed to the sky without saying anything. "And about my parents," she said. "It wasn't me." After saying, "Don't worry, Mrs. Sun, I've been an orphan for as long as I can remember." To the blonde man's and everyone else's amazement, the woman scooped him in her arms and gave him a tender hug. I grinned and lowered him, saying, "You can stay as many times as you want, just don't stay forever." "Are you hungry?" The three of them were left stunned as I said, "Don't worry, I'll do whatever you prefer. And Goku, Naruto can stay with us as long as he wants." I then left for the house. With a foxy smile, the blonde man asked, "What?" "It's easy, 6th Headmaster Sensei. You once told me that women are weak when it comes to sad stories and lonely children." Gohan grinned in astonishment, Goku grinned amusedly, and Piccolo, well, he's Piccolo. The three of them were well aware that this time together would be both lengthy and enjoyable, and they were not mistaken. I felt drawn to Naruto for some reason. His peculiar blonde hair wasn't the cause. Odd? It resembled my own disheveled hair better. Chi-Chi's attempt to style it would be amusing, but you don't want to discuss that, Goku. For the past week, Naruto has been residing with us. Oddly, Chi-Chi is more loving and devoted to him. Bulma told me that, to the best of my understanding, her maternal love is paying off. She tends to him, feeds him, bathes him, and shows him love, affection, and kindness. I can see how every action Chi-Chi takes makes Naruto flush. He's not used to that type of love, I guess. I thought of his mom. Once more, what was her name? Remember, Goku, red hair, Bulma-like temper, but also extremely Naruto-like, she's his mother, of course. Oh, Kushina, I remember now. Indeed, she and Naruto's father disclosed to me in private, well, not so discreetly, given Piccolo's keen hearing, that Naruto was mistreated as a child. He was abused and beaten by the villagers, or something like that. I'll ask Bulma when I see her. I didn't fully understand what that meant. I'll make sure he at least experiences the comfort of a family, even though it was heartbreaking to watch a small boy battle for his life every day. I'll manage, even though I'm not sure exactly how. Milk has made significant progress. The only issue is how I'm going to inform Milk that Gohan and I will be training Naruto. I'll come up with something, but I'm not sure. Or will I require Naruto's assistance? Good luck to me, Dend, I'll need it. Goku? I asked Milk, who was staring at me with concern since I hadn't eaten dinner yet. Not just her, but also Gohan. Naruto was merely observing us with interest, and Piccolo. I simply sensed his smiling stare on me. Oh, it's nothing, Milk, I was just thinking, I said, grinning nervously and stroking the back of my neck. I raised an eyebrow when I felt her place a palm on my forehead. She gave me a troubled look and asked, "Are you okay, Goku? You're not sick, are you?" She calmed down when I simply nodded. Because it's not normal for you to think so much. Ha ha ha, when we heard laughter, we all turned to see that Naruto was the source. He was laughing aloud, holding his stomach and closed his eyes. I'm not sure why, but he seemed content. Milk was grinning broadly as I looked at her. Naruto stopped laughing and said, "What?" I was simply paying close attention to what was being said. Milk grinned and Naruto blushed. This is the first time this week that I've heard you laugh, Naruto. You have a lovely smile, Milk said. I turned to look at Gohan, who was grinning at me. He nodded when I simply gave him a wink. Typical. Our troops and friends were preparing to slumber after a peculiar and sometimes humorous feast. Gohan slept with Naruto, and Goku slept with his wife in his bedroom as usual. However, little Gohan made time each night to read a book or study. It had become a habit, and he developed the odd practice of reading before bed, much to the amusement of one particular blonde boy. Gohan read a quantum physics book. The blonde lad chuckled at this for two reasons. First, he didn't know what it was and didn't want to inquire. Second, he thought it was quite dull and unimportant. To each their own, though. Kami himself had handed the blonde child a book about ki, its powers, strength, how to wield it, and, of course, how he obtained it. Who knows? However, this inquisitive blonde lad liked it, thought it was fascinating, and most importantly, it attracted his attention. The blonde stretched, shutting the book and setting it next to the bed, drawing the raven-haired man's attention. He grinned, scratched his cheek, and closed the book as well, setting it on his desk. Are you sleepy? No, I've been having problems falling asleep recently, and how about you? No, I'm unable to go to sleep after. Little Gohan inquired, "Are you still having those dreams?" and the blonde youngster nodded while crossing his arms. The boy with the raven hair groaned. The blonde youngster had been waking up screaming, drenched in perspiration, shaking, and waking his parents non-stop for the past week. When his mother maintained that the blonde youngster needed assistance, Goku told him that only one person could help him and that he should deal with whatever was happening to him. Do you think? I know what you're thinking, I don't believe it. Bulma-san is very intelligent, but she's not a psychologist. Yes, the blonde guy learned about everything in that dimension, from medicine to politics. You know, when he's bored and has nothing to do, the only thing he can do is read. That's true, but she's incredible. She has a high IQ, acquired the Namekian language in less than a week, and perhaps she can assist you. You're right, the blonde said with a smile, recalling that he had a brilliant acquaintance. The idea of the two of them together made him laugh inwardly. It would greatly strengthen the economy of Hyde Ninja Village and possibly the entire ninja world. Yep, it would be very interesting, he said, shaking his head. This isn't the time for that. But it would have to be tomorrow. I'm already feeling sleepy, and I hope I don't have any nightmares this time. Gohan turned off the little bulb and climbed onto his bed, a tiny bunk bed, while grinning and giving his friend a worried look. Gohan slept on top, and Naruto slept on the bottom. The blonde boy still didn't know how it operated, but it wasn't the right moment to learn, even though it would be entertaining to do so. It will be a long day tomorrow. You're correct. Following that little disagreement, they both went to bed, and for the first time in a week, the blonde lad slept soundly, free from nightmares, unpleasant memories, and most importantly, concerns. In his sleep, Gohan grinned for his companion because, for a brief while, they were both at peace. After several hours, daybreak finally arrived. The raven-haired kid and the blonde lad both opened their eyes and yawned as the sun streamed through the window. Good morning, Naruto. Gohan, good morning. The specified one then leaped from bed and made his way to the bathroom while carrying a towel. The blonde waited till he received approval from his friend. He grinned at the view outside the window. My buddies, 5th Headmaster Obacon, Hyde Ninja Village, and everyone else are all missed. He thought, I just hope they're all right, but they don't need me right now, they need me here. He was thinking of his buddies, teammates, senseis, Irika, 6th Headmaster, and Yamato, all of whom he considered to be extremely valuable. He was so preoccupied that he failed to see Gohan come into the room already dressed. Nrdo? Naruto. Naruto. After dragging him out of his reverie, he said, Huh? What? What's wrong, Gohan? With a smile, Gohan gave him a clean towel. He realized and made his way to the door. A few minutes went by. Now clean, the blonde man was on his way downstairs to go for a walk in the mountains when he was halted in his tracks by a stench that brought him to the kitchen. Goku, Gohan, and were seated there. Piccolo. The three of them were observing the woman in front of them with anxiety. She was holding a ladle in her right hand with her arms folded. No, don't even consider it, Goku. The most essential things are studies, Gohan's welfare, and most importantly, Naruto's happiness. I don't tolerate fighting, and I never will. However, milk. I refused. Naruto was flattered by Miss Milk's opinion of him and grinned at the scene. He found her to be a really peculiar woman, but he appreciated her kindness. Like Piccolo, Goku was a kind man who was incredibly careless. He may have that, talk to me and I'll kill you, mentality, but he's an amazing person, I mean, extraterrestrial, whatever, you get the picture. The important thing is that this blonde man was content. While he was still watching the battle, he crept to his seat and sat down. Milk, it's crucial, we must prepare for some formidable creatures that are on the way. No training. You just recovered from a life-threatening illness, thanks to the young man from the future, so I'm not going to let my Gohan and Naruto take any risks. Well, it's no problem for me. Where I come from, we just finished a war, and we lost many friends and family members. I almost died, but thanks to the effort, training, and faith of several people, we moved forward and achieved peace, Naruto exclaimed, attracting the interest of the others present. Impressed, Milk gave him a look. When did he show up? She was unaware. In addition, the way he spoke made it seem as though nothing had happened and that what he had just stated was the most commonplace thing ever. You, Naruto? There won't be a university for Gohan if Earth doesn't exist. Miss Milk, I know you're scared, but if Earth is in danger, we have to preserve it. Milk was about to respond when the blonde got an idea that made Goku want to slam his head against an oak tree until it cracked. Do you want that? She was aware that the blonde man was correct. She was aware that Gohan had an obligation to defend the Earth because he was born with Saiyan blood. She had him stay at home and study because she feared he might be harmed or killed. It was to keep him safe, not because it was her dream. She sighed as she turned to face her kid. It dawned on her that her child was more than just a developing child. When she looked into Naruto's blue eyes, she noticed that they had the same shine that Goku had when something happened that he didn't like. He was terrified. Well, there was nothing else she could do. Okay, she murmured as she put her hands on the blonde boy's shoulder and met his gaze. She said, "Just take care of my Gohan, please," in his ear. Gohan grinned broadly as he nodded. "But I want you both here for dinner, understood?" A bead of perspiration formed on their foreheads as the four of them nodded, much to Piccolo's dismay. To prevent any further catastrophes, they departed the house for a remote location after breakfast. With his eyes wide with anticipation, Naruto stared, wondering what sort of instruction he would be receiving. Would he take to the skies? He pondered, recalling the sensation of flying on the flying Nimbus. But he wanted to have that experience on his own, not on anything. "All right, Naruto, we'll start by learning how to manage ki." With bright eyes, the blonde child inquired, "Will I fly?" Goku nodded and gave him a smile. "There wouldn't be any issues managing ki because you already know what it is and all that is required. You have chakra control in addition to ki, based on what you told me and what I can see. That will make things a little more difficult, but not impossible." Piccolo and Gohan watched the situation closely as the older man showed the blonde the proper way to use ki and fly. The Namekian was analyzing it, and Gohan was grinning as he saw his father and his friend. They were both extremely similar and yet quite different. Gohan. "Indeed, Mr. Piccolo?" He stared at the blonde and said, "Naruto, don't you know you guys can transform into Super Saiyans yet?" As he focused, he was surprised to see that his feet were only half a centimeter off the ground. The blonde had already raised his feet off the floor before an hour had even passed. He was aware that the actual training would start as soon as the blonde was able to fly. Not just yet. Dad believes he should figure it out on his own and that now is not the best moment to tell him. Why? It's nothing significant. Bulma, I'm terrified. I'm not sure if allowing Gohan and Naruto to train was the proper decision. Milk told her buddy, "I have a feeling something bad will happen to them." Bulma stood in front of her, grinning and examining her with her blue eyes. The woman in front of her nodded, and she said, "I understand your concern, Milk, but I know Gohan will be very strong and he'll be fine. Didn't you ask Naruto to take care of him?" She nodded once more. "Do you trust his word?" she said. "Then have a little more faith in your son, Milk." However, I realize that I too worry about Trunks' future, but it's for the bigger picture. Goku, the others, and Naruto are the only ones who can save us from the perilous state of the earth. I have a feeling that if we believe them, everything will work out. Yes. Bulma grinned as she gazed up at the sky beyond the window. She had an odd feeling, but she wasn't sure if it was a good or negative feeling. When she removed her jacket after feeling something vibrating within, she discovered it was a communicator. She responded after touching it. "Hi. Is that you, Bulma?" "Yes, Krillin, what's the matter?" They launched another onslaught. "What? Where? How?" Concerned, Milk felt the woman's chest after hearing her scream. She had to wait, but that would be horrible news. "I'll locate Goku, and we'll proceed there." "This is excellent, Bulma." "Tell me." "Take extreme caution." "Don't worry, Krillin, I will." She hung up and looked worriedly at the girl with the raven hair behind her. She grinned at her as she turned around. Milk was worried for her friend, but she didn't want to worry her because she knew something bad was going to happen to her. Glancing into Bulma's azure eyes, she realized that she felt the same way. "Stay here and look after yourself, I'll go grab Goku and the others." That being said, the woman with the lilac hair walked out of the house, got into her spaceship, and flew toward her companion. With much concern, Milk gazed up into the sky. "Bulma!" "Gysis!" In the distance, a woman yelled. The fighters noticed a sort of cream-colored flying ship when they gazed up at the sky. When the ship touched down, a big sea appeared around it. Knowing who it was, Goku grinned. Gohan grinned broadly and rushed off in that direction. Piccolo simply folded his arms, and little Naruto approached his friend with an inquisitive expression before grinning upon recognizing him. It was Bulma Briefs, the sweet young woman with a fiery temper. She made him think of his mom. Patriarch Sun approached his friend and said, "Bulma, what are you doing here?" However, he could tell by the woman's expression that something was amiss. "It's them, isn't it?" The woman gave a nod. Worried but not sure why, Goku gazed at his best friend. Her eyes were peaceful and placid, as though nothing were amiss. That expression conveyed emptiness, but from what? Then he realized that the woman in front of them was bothered by something, and that something had to do with her own future son. "Trunks?" He looked at his comrade and then focused his blue eyes on the blonde Goku's face. "He went to train with Vegeta, they'll be back in a few moments." Like the woman, he looked first at the blonde man and then at Gohan and said, "I know. I suppose you're ready, in the same place?" "Further west," the lady said, keeping her gaze fixed on the blonde man. "I'll go warn Vegeta." Goku watched his friend as the woman made her way to the ship. "Bulma." He closed the hatch and said, "Don't worry, I'll be fine or so I think star. However, there was one thing that alarmed him. Piccolo spotted Bulma's terrified expression as she shut the hatch. As the spacecraft vanished into the distance, they all watched. "Goku," he said, "it's time to go, guys," and Piccolo and Gohan took off after him. They observed the blonde youngster, who was still unable to fly as quickly as them. Swinging his arms to keep his balance, he barely managed to take off. Grinning, Goku called forth the flying Nimbus and invited the blonde lad to ride once more. He climbed on without reluctance. "Come on."